of us coming together and helping you all learn about resumes done right. So feel free to go in there and utilize that chat feature and just talk to us. Let us know what your questions are. So we'll go ahead and get started, and I'll introduce myself, and then of course there's going to be about 3 of us today that are going to chime in and give some input and try to unpack this topic that we call your resume and how to use your resume to get you noticed. So my name is Tracy Mitchell, and I work down at Virginia Highlands Community College within our Student Services Division. I'm the Director of Recruitment and Career Services for the community college. So we're very happy to have you all on the call today. And Kimber, do you want to chime in and maybe just introduce yourself and get Beth to say hello too?
Hi, I'm Kimber Simmons. I am the Business Services Coordinator with the New River Mount Rogers Workforce Board, and I also occasionally do a little work with job seekers as well.
Hi everyone, I am Beth Carrico. I'm the Director of Workforce Development with People Incorporated, and we serve job seekers and businesses and try to connect all of those resources in our area. We're glad to have you today.
Okay, so we'll get started. We'll talk about your resume today and how you can develop and customize a resume so that you can get noticed by employers. Just looking a little bit on our agenda, we'll unpack for you a little bit about what exactly a resume is and how we use a resume. We're going to talk about some different types of resumes and which resume type might be best for you, depending upon your background, depending upon your situation. We're going to talk about how you should get started with a resume. That's really an important piece is, you know, even before you start that resume, what are some of the things that you're going to need to do first before you even start developing that document? And then we're going to talk a little bit about the anatomy of a resume, and then also references. What are references? Who do we want to use as references, and how can those references be useful for us when we're job seeking? So let's start off with the question, what is a resume? And oftentimes when we facilitate or we teach on this slide, we talk about the resume as really kind of being your personal advertisement. And it's advertising to the employer your educational background, your skills, your work experience, all of those things that you have working for you in your toolbox that make you qualified for that position that you're going to be applying for. So the resume really answers 3 questions. It answers, number 1, who are you? Who are you? What have you done? But then also, what do you know? And when you're constructing your resume and you're trying to use your resume to answer these 3 questions, who are you, what have you done, and what do you know, you always want to think about that in context of the position that you are applying for. So what that means for you is really before you even start to do your resume, you're going to want to research that job. You're going to want to research that company. You're going to want to really understand the types of skills, the types of knowledge, the type of work history that company is looking for. And then that's the type of information that you're going to want to include on that resume. And Kimber and Beth, you guys have got a whole lot to say. So anytime you want to chime in and unpack anything, I want you all to get in there too. So again, your resume is really kind of your personal advertisement, and look at your resume kind of as a tool. Right now, if you're looking for work, then it's your job to find a job, right? So if we think about a carpenter or we think about anybody else out there in the workforce, typically they got a toolbox of some sort that they take to work with them. You're also going to do that as a job seeker. When you're a job seeker, it is your job to find employment and to find work. So a resume is one of the tools that you're going to be able to utilize that. It communicates your value to a prospective employer. And I've heard a lot of companies say that they feel like that the resume can be one of, if not the most important tool that you can use to communicate your value to that company. They may receive 100 different applications, and if they have an application form, to a certain extent, all of the candidates start looking the same on that job application. But the resume is really an opportunity for you to pull out some of your uniquenesses and communicate those things to the employer. And it's also the company's first impression of you. So that's why we've got to really get this resume right. That's why you want to spend a whole lot of time preparing for your resume. You want to spend a lot of time working on that resume. It's going to be the company's first impression of you. So we want to make sure that we help you to get that resume right.
I do want to add one thing, and that is quite often your resume is going to change depending on the job you apply for. Every job you can slightly alter your resume so that it is specific to that job. Because, as this says, this is the company's first impression of you, and you want that to be a good first impression.
And that's a good point that Kimber brought out. You know, maybe you're a nurse, or maybe you're a machinist, or maybe you're a welder, and you might think, well, you know, I'm applying for the same type of job every time. Why does it matter? Well, every company's job description and the way that they advertise the job, you know, chances are they're going to look for something just a little bit different. Maybe they have a different type of machine that they're using. Maybe because of the culture of the company, you know, there's a certain skill set or transferable skill. You know, maybe somebody that is just really good as a team player and working as a part of a team. Maybe that's really important to the culture of that particular company. So those are the types of things that you definitely want to capture on that resume. So we've got different types of resumes, and we're going to unpack this a little bit and talk about these 3 different types of resumes and which type might be best for you to use. We're going to talk about chronological resumes. We're going to talk about functional resumes. And then we're also going to spend a little bit of time talking about what we call a hybrid resume, which is really kind of a combination of a chronological and a functional resume. Did you all know that there were all these different types of resumes? Did you think maybe there was just one? All right, so let's start off talking about the chronological resume. I think this is the one that probably you all are the most familiar with. I think this is the default that most people go to when they're going to develop a resume, and rightly so, because the chronological resume is typically the one that's most commonly used. And I think it's also the one that most employers are probably most used to looking at, and oftentimes they prefer. And we've got a couple of samples here in a couple minutes, or a couple slides that we're going to show you of a chronological resume. But what a chronological resume does is it lists out your previous jobs, and it's going to start with the most recent job. It's going to list that one first on the top, and then work your way back to some of those older positions that you've had. Some benefits of the chronological resume, kind of like we said, it's the one that employers typically are used to, and it is one that oftentimes that they do prefer. But if you have ever maybe been in a position where you have received some promotions, for example, a chronological resume is going to give you an opportunity to show growth in your job title, but maybe also the amount of responsibility that you've had in working for a company. So that's going to look good for you. And then it's also going to highlight experience in a similar career field. So there's a lot of reasons why you're probably going to want to use a chronological resume. We think this is a really good example, really just of a resume in general, but also a chronological resume. Just a few general things that we'll point out about this resume. You're going to notice right here at the top is where we have the candidate's name and their contact information. And the thing that's in a larger font than anything else on the resume is the candidate's name. You want them to remember your name and remember who you are. This is a nice looking example of a resume. Looks like they've probably used some 1-inch margins here, which leaves plenty of white space around the outer edges of a resume. Makes it look really neat, really clean, really easy to read. And then you're also going to see that they've used some specific headings here for qualifications. But you'll notice that the different resume sections, professional experience, education, skills, and accomplishments, they put those things in bold. So it really makes it a lot easier for your reader to look at and to read and to review. But with this being a chronological resume, you're going to see where they start with their most recent position and company that they've worked for. It looks like they've worked as a bookkeeper for a reconstruction company from 2008 to the current period of time to present. And then they work their way back some of the older jobs. So that's what makes this a chronological resume. One other thing that we'll point out is the use of bullet points on this resume really makes it a lot easier for a reviewer to read as well. So we think this is a pretty good example of what a good chronological resume could look like. Kimber or Beth, do you all want to chime in and say anything about this particular resume?
Just definitely reiterate having some space around each section and having the bold headings very clearly labeled and very easy for a reviewer to find. If it gets too busy, too wordy, very lengthy paragraphs, I feel as though most reviewers just kind of skim past it because of the amount of time the amount of resumes they have to review, the amount of time they have to spend on them. It's a very short period of time, so you want to make it very clear, very concise, and very easy to find the relevant information. And I feel like this example is great at doing that.
Yeah, it gets too busy. They almost want to run from it, don't they, Beth?
Yes.
All right, so does anybody have any questions there about the chronological resume that you want to throw into the chat window? Please feel free to do so at any time if you guys want to. So we'll talk a little bit about a functional resume and what we call a hybrid resume. A functional resume is a little bit different than a chronological resume because a functional resume focuses more on a specific skill set that you might have, such as project management, leadership. The focus is on that particular skill set rather than the focus being on each individual job and how long you worked at that job. And there's some advantages with that. The advantage is that it does focus upon your accomplishments. It focuses on your skills. And this could really be a useful resume for a first-time job seeker or somebody that's making a career change. Maybe you don't necessarily have a certain amount of experience in this new field that you're going into, but maybe you have skills that you used in a field that you worked in previously that could be transferred and could be a useful skill set into this new field. That would be a good reason that you would maybe want to use a functional resume. The thing with a functional resume, and I'm going to say this cautiously, the chronological resume, like we said, is very common and it's one that's used. Oftentimes, job seekers who have maybe had a poor work history, and an example of a poor work history is maybe they have had multiple short-term jobs. Maybe they have worked for one company for just a few months, and then there was a period of time that they didn't work, and then they worked for another company for 3 or 4 months. Sometimes we see job seekers with that type of a work history use a functional resume. And the only thing about that is sometimes I think it can maybe raise some red flags for some employers and some companies because they are looking to see some longevity on your resume. So I think a solution to that, and Kimber was going to unpack this one a little bit more, is what we could call a hybrid resume. So it does a little bit of both. The hybrid resume is going to show some of that work history, those past jobs, and how long you were at those jobs. But rather than putting so much focus on your past work history, it's going to put more focus on your skills and on your accomplishments by maybe pushing those further up to the top of your resume. And I want to say something just really quickly here. It's always a good idea to put the most important information about you, the things about you that are really your selling points that make you qualified for that position. It's always a good idea to put those up toward the top of the resume. And that's really what this hybrid resume does if you choose to use this. And I saw this illustration one time in a workshop that I sat in, and I always remembered it. Sometimes I don't remember what people say, but if they do things and they give me a visual, I remember it. So I'm going to do that same thing for you guys. She took a piece of paper and she just folded it. Hope you all can see that. I think where I've got my virtual background, it might look a little bit crazy. So I'm going to take my virtual background off and y'all can see my messy house. But she took a piece of paper and she just folded it like this. And the illustration that she gave is, you know, when somebody reads your resume, if you read something, if you pick up a book to read a book, you're not going to start at the end of the book and read it. You're going to start on page 1 and you're going to read it from top to bottom, from left to right. And that's the same way with a resume. So she folded up that piece of resume paper just to illustrate the importance of getting the most important information about you up toward the top, even over toward the left if you can, because typically people will look at resumes and they will read it top to bottom, left to right. And that's a little bit of what the hybrid resume does, is it puts more focus on your skills, it puts more focus on your accomplishments, and it does that by moving those things up toward the top of the resume. Kimber, do you want to chime in here and add some things about the hybrid?
Sure, this is an example of a hybrid, because you'll see the areas of expertise where it kind of breaks down their skill sets into categories. And when you do that, you pull from all of your experience. Like under reception and customer service, that's probably from all of their different work experiences, putting all that information together. But yet, as you go look down the page, you'll see under work experience, they still list their work history. Excuse me. They just don't put as much emphasis on the particular jobs as they do the skills and experience. And this is actually an example of someone who doesn't have a lot of true work experience, but they do have experience from volunteer work, from internship. And that's why it's really good for someone who's a newer job seeker, or if you were going to just change your job, like maybe you were working as an office manager and you don't want to do that work anymore. You actually want to focus on your ability for customer service, and you want to do that in maybe retail. So you don't want people to focus on, this is the type of job I've always had. You want them to focus on, here are the skills that I bring to the table.
And I guess we can go on to the next slide. So we'll talk a little bit about getting started, you know, determining the focus of your resume and what jobs you're going to target. This is where we want to really just reiterate the importance of really researching the job and understanding what exactly is that company's looking for. Oftentimes, if we, you know, find a job that's posted online, it could be posted, you know, quite a few employers still utilize the newspaper. Then we see a lot of things posted online on some popular sites such as Indeed.com or Monster. Oftentimes they'll specify within that advertisement what it is that they're looking for in terms of, you know, how much experience, what type of skills, what type of education that they want you to have. So it's really important that you spend some time researching that job so that you understand exactly what it is that that company is looking for before you ever even do that resume. And Kimber mentioned something a few minutes ago, and we'll just go back and reiterate that here. You're going to have a different resume for every job that you apply for. It may not be drastically different. You might have, I guess, the skeleton or the foundation of a resume built. And then once you read that advertisement and you see that that company specifies a certain skill set or a certain amount of experience, you're going to take your resume and you're going to modify and customize your resume to show that company that you have that. It's also a good idea to really start thinking about, and don't wait until you're job searching to do this. I think it's a good idea for you to maintain some type of a portfolio or a journal. And, you know, throughout your professional career or throughout your education, as you attain additional skill sets, as you attain additional experience, you know, when you achieve certain accomplishments in the workplace, an accomplishment could be something in the form of a formal recognition like an award, you know, but an accomplishment could be something, you know, maybe you increase sales by a certain percentage. Kind of think a little bit bigger about some of your accomplishments, how you really made an impact for that company. So don't wait until the last minute to keep a log of those things all throughout your professional career. I encourage you to keep somewhat of a journal or a portfolio where you keep really just kind of a running log. It could be an Excel spreadsheet where you keep a running log of these types of things. And if you haven't done that, you know, before you do your resume, take some time just to get to yourself and get quiet and get out a pen and a piece of paper and really reflect back over your education and over your career and ask yourself, you know, where have I made a contribution? Where have I made an impact? Where have I made a difference? What do people tell me, you know, my strengths and my skills and my accomplishments are? And create a list of those things and then use those things on that resume. And then, of course, you're going to want to compile all of your employment information. You're going to want to reflect back and think about, you know, where you have worked in the past. The dates of employment, I find this to be kind of challenging for people sometimes. On the resume, typically you're going to include the month and the year that you started, and then the month and the year that you've left. Sometimes those dates can get a little bit fuzzy, I guess, and it's hard to remember those things. I do think it's important, though, that we be accurate on that, because I've run across situations where somebody wasn't sure about a date, and, you know, they would guess, and they might be off by a year, but then the company would do a reference check on your previous employment and found out that the dates were different. And if you're off by a lot, sometimes it could maybe look like you were misrepresenting something, even if you didn't intend to. So it might even be that you take some time to call up your past employers and ask them if they could verify, you know, your dates of employment and things. But I think this is some of the type of information that you're going to want to start gathering so that when it comes time to build your resume, you're going to be ready to go. Beth, Kimber, y'all got anything to add? Nope. Okay, we'll keep rolling.
One thing, and that is the more specific you can be about those skills and accomplishments, particularly if it includes ways that you saved a company money or time, or you created a project, something that helped with efficiency or brought in more customers. Those are the things that companies love to see, because that's the information that gives them an idea of what you can bring to their company.
So when we talk a little bit about formatting your resume, our advice is always to keep the formatting simple. On some of those other resume examples, like the one that you saw, the very first chronological resume example, you saw that it was just a pretty simple font. You don't need to do any kind of clever formatting. You don't have to do anything to make your look fancy, so to speak. Sometimes just keeping it simple is better. Sometimes when companies or when resumes are submitted and uploaded electronically, some companies will use a screening or a scanner tool, to scan that resume for certain keywords that they're looking for. Maybe they're looking for somebody with customer service experience who's got a very strong level of proficiency in Microsoft Excel, for example. They might run that resume through a document or through a tool that will scan that resume for those keywords. And I'll put in a plug right there for keywords. Make sure when you do your resume, again, if there's any little keywords or things that company's looking for in the job description, that's another reason why you're going to want to include those. But in using some of those scanning tools, and then also just in the general, just when you upload and submit resumes electronically and they go through that process, a lot of times fancy formatting can start to look pretty crazy on your resume. So keep just very simple fonts. You don't want to use too small of a font size. I wouldn't use even a font size as low as 10. I wouldn't use anything, below 12. Because it can be really difficult for the employer even just to read the document. There's some really neat templates out there that you can use that take away the headache of maybe just starting with a blank page in Word and trying to format the document. Rather than just starting with a blank document in Word, Microsoft Word actually has some resume formats that you can use. I would be careful with some of those. Some of those are pretty basic and simple, and that's what we're recommending here. Some of those can get a little bit more fun. They'll have some graphics and things like that on them. And for the most part, we don't recommend that you use those types of templates. I guess if you were applying for a position in graphic design or something like that, and you're wanting to show off a certain skill set, it could be suitable there. But we tend to recommend that folks stick with a simple template. The Virginia Workforce Connection system also has a background wizard that you can fill out and you can complete, and you can build a resume through that system as well. And I can't remember if we've got some information in here about the BWC system or not, Kimber. We might want that to them. But that's just another tool that can be used to build resumes. It's also used, every state has an employment service, and in Virginia, it's the Virginia Employment Commission, and that employment service serves both businesses and job seekers. So by having a resume in that system, there could be some matching of you to some available employment opportunities that are out there. Another thing, this has become one of my favorite, a lot of the community colleges work with a company called MZ. And MZ is a tool that we use to help us gather labor market data about growing, occupations, but it can be used for other purposes as well. Virginia Highlands Community College uses it, and we've branded it with our own terminology, and we call it Career Explorer. And this has been kind of my go-to tool recently for supporting students in the area of job seeking. You can visit vhcc.edu/Career Explorer. And I encourage folks, it's more people than students, anybody can use it. Students use it, but community members as well. But you can create an account in Career Explorer. And when you create that account, you can save, I think it's up to like 12 different copies of a resume. So we talked about having a different resume for every job that you apply for. Career Explorer is useful in helping you to do that. And it's really good to help you just, build a good foundation for a resume. It does all of the formatting for you. It kind of takes away those frustrating things when we're trying to build a resume. It'll help you with the wording. Sometimes we find that job seekers struggle, to get the right words on paper, regarding what some of their past work experience has been. It also helps you with that. And then you can extract it and download it into a Word document and do some additional enhancements just to make it look a little bit nicer. For example, that's where you can make your name bigger. and put some of the headings that we spoke about previously in bold. So these are some really useful tools that can make the whole formatting process a lot easier for folks when they're working on their resume. You certainly want to make it easy for the company to get in touch with you. You all saw on that resume example up toward the top, you're going to include your name, you're going to include your address, include a daytime, telephone number. Maybe you have a landline at home, but you also have a cell number. Make it easy for them to contact you. If you just put a landline home number and you don't list a cell number, but then you're gone during the days, it makes it difficult for them to reach you. So, provide good contact information. If you provided a telephone number, set up your voicemail. Sometimes it can be frustrating when a company tries to call you and it just says the customer that you're trying to reach is not available. Please try again later. And chances are they're not going to try again later because they're busy and they kind of just keep moving on to the next person. So set up a nice professional email address or voicemail. Thank you for calling. My name is, I'm sorry I've missed your call. Please leave a message and I will return your call very soon. So it doesn't have to be anything. It can be pretty simple, but make sure you have a voicemail set up. Use professional email addresses too. Something like jsmith@email.com is what we want to see on your resume, and it's what employers want to see on your resume. They don't want to see baby cakes 23, baby 23 cakes at email.com. I tell a joke of a gentleman by the name of Taylor that applied with a job for me one time, and his email address was the first thing I saw on his resume, and it was bigdaddytay@gmail.com, and I could not get over that email address to even give serious consideration to the rest of the resume. So little things like that, folks, are important, and they really do go a long way. Again, the resume is the first impression that people have of you. So yeah, these are all really good points. Beth and Kimber, anything y'all want to add there?
I do want to add that when you set up an email, try to make sure that you don't include like your date of birth because that dates you. And not that you just don't want to give people any reason to automatically have some type of bias against you. So try not to, include your date of birth in your email address, or even things that you think may not be that no one would be upset about. Like I actually have worked with an individual whose email address was VTechFan13. Well, there may be someone who really doesn't like Virginia Tech, and they are the person for resume. You just don't want that to give any person any reason to kind of think less of you or negate you, or sometimes the bias is completely internal and they don't even realize it. But just the easiest thing is something with your name on it, and if you need to add a number, make it a number that they won't really understand that it has a significance with a date or such.
Yeah. And you can create, if you need to go to Gmail or wherever and create an email account just for purposes of job seeking and put that on your resume, you could do that. I would add there, make sure you check your junk mail just in case that employer does try to reach out to you and for whatever reason it got sent to your junk mail. So if you put that email address on there, and we recommend that you do, check it every day. Check your junk mail and make sure you're checking those voicemails too, because you don't want that call to come in and you didn't get it, and something very simple knocked you out of the running for a job. So make sure that you're checking that daily. All right, let's see what else we've got going on here. We like this section, don't we, ladies? The summary of qualifications on the resume. And I'm certainly going to ask Beth and Kimber to jump in here. This is a really important section, and I use it on my own personal resume. Anytime I help a job seeker with a resume, I have a fly buzzing around in front of me. I'll look over that. I use a summary of qualifications. So we've already told you that before you do your resume, you want to research that job and you want to know what exactly it is that they're looking for. They're looking for 10 years of manufacturing experience and somebody who has a strong respect for quality control and safety. Or we are looking for a proficient office manager with excellent organizational skills and who can do just amazing things with Microsoft Office and Word and Excel. Whatever it is that they are looking for, you have got to make sure, assuming that you have those skills, we need to be honest on our resume and very authentic and very honest, but assuming that you meet those requirements and you have those qualifications, you have to put them on your resume. And not only do you have to put them on your resume, but you want to put them on your resume where people can see them. And does anybody know how long on average companies look at resumes? Feel free to throw something in the chat box if you want to. On average, how long, do you think an employer is going to review a resume? 5 minutes, a minute, a second? Anybody want to take a shot at it? I don't see anything coming in, so we'll go ahead and throw out an answer. The answer is, what, did somebody put one on there?
It was me.
Oh, how long is it, Kimber?
For most times they give you between 8 and 30 seconds before they decide if they're actually going to truly read your resume or not.
Yeah.
8 seconds.
Yep. That is not very long. So because that is not very long, that's where this summary of qualification section becomes so important. We would recommend that the very first thing that other than your name and your contact information, the very first thing that company sees on your resume is a summary of qualifications. And guys, this is where you got to spell it out in black and white. You're looking for somebody, who's proficient with Microsoft Office. Well, I've got the certifications in Word, Excel, PowerPoint. You're looking for somebody who has a strong respect for OSHA. I've got OSHA 10 cards, OSHA 30 cards. This is where you're really going to put those things out there, is on that summary of qualifications, and make sure that you put the most relevant skills and experience right there. It's really an opportunity to put your best foot forward, again, right at the top of your resume. And here you can pull from any of your previous work, volunteer, educational experience, professional development trainings that you've been a part of. But this is really the section where you're going to want to make yourself shine. You're going to want to make yourself shine big. It's the summary of qualifications section. So basically, you're looking at that job description and the things that they're looking for, and you're just telling it back to them. You're just speaking it right back to them. You're looking for this. Well, guess what? I've got it. And this is an example of how I have it. And then you might throw in a certification or a certain number of years of experience or something like that, just to support what you're saying.
I would definitely second that, Tracy. And that initial review, that 8 to 30 seconds, this is likely the one section that they're looking at to see if they're going to then review your resume further and go into any of those other sections. So absolutely, hands down, I would say this is the most important section to work on, to tweak for every job application, every resume that you're submitting, and to make sure that you are listing those specific relevant skills that the employer is looking for. And again, you hear about keywords and computers matching resumes to jobs based on keywords. And I always kind of thought, well, what are the keywords? How do I find the keywords? But you find those in your review of the job posting. So things that they consistently say in the job posting, those would be words that you want to use. So for instance, you can, call a job posting, and employment listing, a job posting, an advertisement, look at the specific language that they use. And you might be saying the same exact thing, but if you're using different language, it may not get through, because the reviewer sometimes also isn't the person, the person who knows the job the best.
That's good.
So
Yeah.
you may say something in language that to you means the same thing, but to the reviewer, if it's an HR clerk and they don't do that job day in and day out, they may not know that the terms you used are the same terms that there is in their job description, but if you call it something different, they may not recognize that.
Mhm. Yeah, that's good. And I've had that happen in my own reviewing of resumes. I'll see something and I'll be honest with you, it might be something that I'm not familiar with, and I might have to go over to the engineering professor or the machining professor and say, hey, look at this, but not everybody's going to do that when you're an HR professional and you got 100 resumes looking at you. You're trying to work quickly. So I think that's a really good point. All right. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about the work experience. And I think there's a few important points that we want to make here. We want to, include your previous work experience or relevant experience. If you've had, internship opportunities, I typically build those into this section for students. I've had students, I think about some of our healthcare programs that do clinical rotations. We put that right in here as experience that they've been getting. You're going to want to start with your most recent job again and work your way back. I've been noticing a few resumes lately where people have been listing out like the full address of the employer and like the phone number. For the resume, you need to put the name of the employer, and you can put the city and state, but you don't need to waste precious 8 seconds telling them the street and the P.O. box of the company. So just list the city and the state, your job title, and then you can list your dates of employment. And I think the month and the year is sufficient here. You don't have to list the exact date. And truthfully, if you were there for, several years, if you were there for 10 years, even at that point, I don't know that the month necessarily matters. I like to see consistency on a resume though. So if I see you list months and years in one area, I'm typically looking for months and years in the other areas too. So I would just be consistent there. Use bullet points, and the bullet points, and again, everything that you're putting on your resume, it needs to tie back again to your research and the job description and what that company's looking for. You don't want to write in paragraphs. You want to use bullet points to really kind of list out what your responsibilities have been in past jobs, but don't become too responsibility oriented. You want to be able to show outcomes and results, and that could look different depending on what your industry is. Maybe you increased customer satisfaction rates, maybe you increased sales, maybe in my work, maybe we have increased, student retention by a certain percentage. I work with some students in our precision machining program, and, quality control is really important there. We don't want to see those students when they're, machining out parts. We don't want to see them waste a lot of metal. We don't want to have scrap metal because that's money for the company. So a lot of times we'll put on there if a student has a really low scrap metal rate, meaning they're not wasting a lot of raw material, we'll put that on the resume. So I think anytime you can use numbers and percentages and make it a more results-oriented description is the way that we've got it worded here, you're going to want to do that on the resume. Kimber, Beth, anything you all want to add there? That's another, I think, important piece that I would rank up there, even with like that summary of qualifications. I think that's something that you want to really, I think people get caught up in, well, I was responsible for, and that's okay. But I think sometimes we get caught up in just saying what our day-to-day activities were on the job and we don't take the time to ask ourselves, you know, how did we make a difference? How did we make an impact? How did we improve something? How did we affect the bottom line, so to speak? So spend some time on this piece of your resume too.
And I wanted to add that you do not have to list every job you ever had. Usually the most recent job employment, the last 5 to 10 years for most people is best, because you also, again, don't want to date yourself, and people don't want to spend time reading things that are irrelevant either. So if you had a job in high school and you're now in your 30s, unless that job is exceptionally relevant or the experience there is exceptionally relevant to the job you're applying for, you may not want to include it. Because again, you're trying to put your most important, most relevant information on there, and we also don't want it to be 4 pages long, because no one's going to read 4 pages.
Yeah, that's good. All right, so we'll keep moving, and again, we kind of go back here. Keywords are important. Beth has already referenced this. You know, if there's keywords in that job description, that's where you find those keywords. You want to make sure that you include those on your resume and on your application for a variety of different reasons. And it's always a good idea, in addition to keywords, we want to use action words. Action words really kind of ignite your resume. So instead of saying that you helped with something, maybe you assisted with something, maybe you developed or designed a certain spreadsheet that was used to track customer data. Use some of those really professional, strong action words, and we list out a few of these as well: utilized, supported, developed, implemented, engaged, managed. But keywords can go a long way in really kind of igniting your resume. We'll talk a little bit about education. Similar to work experience, you're going to list that in reverse chronological order, starting with your most recent. Sometimes you can start running out of space on your resume. Beth and Kimber, you all feel free to chime in here, but once I've worked with a college student and they're graduating and they've got their college degree, at that point I don't see a need to list out high school education. I'm careful with high school education, because sometimes when you put that diploma degree, if you put a date on there for a high school diploma date, Kimber made reference a few minutes ago about how sometimes dates can date you. It gives away your age, and it's just not their business at this point. So we don't want to do that. So you're going to list the name of the school, list out your degree and your dates of attendance. And then I think it's okay too, if you need to use a few bullet points, maybe to unpack a couple specifics, maybe of some related or relevant coursework that you've had. You can do that. When I have students that have a really good GPA, I encourage them to put their GPA on there. I'm most impressed when I look at a resume and I see somebody that's been holding down a job while they're in school, and yet they're still able to maintain a good GPA while they're in school. That's very impressive to me, and it tells me a story about that person. You can also, don't forget, different types of professional development and trainings maybe that previous employers have sent you to. That could really speak to your desire and your love and your interest in lifelong learning, which I think any employer is going to appreciate. And then once again, for students and new graduates, related coursework can also be included. And I would recommend that you put that on there too. Certifications are good. Certifications and licenses, depending on the type of industry or the type of field that you're in. I think certifications are good because you know, it shows that you have had to attain a skill set according to some third-party standard. So definitely include certifications and licenses. If you have any kind of other relevant skills that you haven't listed elsewhere, such as in your work experience or summary of qualifications, I think it's a good idea, you know, normally to list out software proficiency for almost any occupation, because chances are you're going to have an email address and you're going to need to be able to check your email. So I think it can be always a good idea to mention your computer and software proficiency. I think this is also a good place. We continue to hear, I was on a telephone conversation with an employer just yesterday morning, and we hear this over and over, but we hear those workplace excellence skills or soft skills. You know, we hear they're looking for people with a good attitude, people that have that strong work ethic that'll show up to work on time. So I think that, you know, keep in mind those soft skills, and what your soft skills are transferable skills that no matter where you go, a company's going to want. And this could be a good place to mention some of those skills too. So yep, proofread, top to bottom, bottom back to top. It never fails. I proofread a document, I look at it 10 times, and bam, there's an error there, even though I looked at it over and over again. So proofread it, but we put in here, it's even better to have someone else to do it. For some reason, after we look at something for so long, I think we sort of become desensitized, maybe to some errors in the document, grammatical errors, spelling errors. So absolutely proofread it top to bottom, bottom back to top, and ask somebody else to proofread it for you. Be consistent. We alluded to this a little bit earlier, but be consistent on your resume, such as with the dates. If you're going to include, you know, the month and the year with one employer, go ahead and include the month and the year with the other employers and two. I like this about the verb tense. You know, if you're going to talk in the present tense or the past tense, be consistent on that. If it's a job that you're no longer working at and you left that job, you know, 3 years ago, you want to speak to that job in the past tense. But I've seen where people will go back and forth. They'll use a past tense verb and then they'll use a present tense verb. And for me, for some reason, it's just a little bit of a point of frustration. So be consistent in the way that you do that. And guys, I tell people all the time, be brief, be brilliant, and be gone. You know, you don't need to write a book for them. You want to give them just enough information about you so that they can see, all right, this person's got something to offer, and I want to learn a little bit more about him or her. And then they'll do that in the interview. So, you know, be concise. Keep it to a one-page resume. If you do have a lot of really relevant skills and experience, it would be okay to go to a 2-page resume. I can't imagine ever going over 2 pages though. So yeah, keep it clean and keep it as brief as you can, and be concise with your resume. And Kimber, you want to talk about these things? These are fun.
Yeah, these are the most fun part when we show you what not to do. You may notice there's a picture of a baby on this resume. And the assumption probably is that that person has included a picture of their baby. And actually, no, the person who did this resume put a picture of them as a baby. I have no idea why you do that. Actually, I would suggest to shy away from putting a picture of yourself on your resume anyway. Again, it's going to be, when you upload it, uploading graphics is odd, and it can sometimes shift formatting and make your resume look weird. But also, again, with that, you don't want people to rule you out immediately for some reason that you have no control over. There are other things that with this resume that are kind of annoying. That background picture, that kind of watermark picture. And And I'm not sure about the whole fanciness of putting your skills in a different color because, again, the person who prints it out is probably going to use a different printer than you. It may look a little weird. There's just several things about this one that annoy me, but the baby picture is the big one. So let's not include baby pictures. Okay, what's your first impression of this resume? Yes, I see a face. That's exactly what I did. When I first saw it, I was like, oh, I don't want to look at it, much less try to read it. There are so many things wrong. One is that huge block of text, and it's very tiny, and I'd have to get a magnifying glass to read it. And then also over here on the side, I'm not really sure what this is, but I think that they're saying that they consider themselves to have a 4 out of 5 skills on Microsoft Office and a 4 out of 5. I don't think you ever want to rank yourself that way, period. This says, hey, I'm not as good as I could be, because that's exactly what that says. And honestly, that's just what I think it says. I'm not even sure what those little blocks mean. And if I'm not sure, then neither is anyone else. So just remember that. But the big one is the moment I looked at this, I literally just want to turn my head. I do not have any reason to make me want to read it. And you don't ever want someone to have that reaction to your resume. You guys have anything else with those? That one is just unhappy. I'm not even sure where to start on what's wrong. I think it'd be easier to tell you what's right. This one. First of all, there's no consistency in anything. There's no little actual real organization. Never, ever, ever should you put this type of personal information on your resume. It is not the company's business, and no one with HR can actually ask you about your marital status. I don't think you want to tell them straight up, hey, I think I need to lose 20 pounds. And while collecting international coins is kind of a cool hobby, but it's really not relevant. So yeah, that's really unimportant. And I have not found it to be a good thing to include your current salary or your expected salary on a resume. That's something that may come up in interview, but I wouldn't just put it out there that way. And and there are just so many other things. It's just using their previous employer. Well, they just kind of listed all of their employers there. See, there's one after another. That doesn't make any sense. And see, and their job titles just one after another. Because I'm like, tennis pro shop supervisor. Well, my guess is that was not when they were with Fidelity Investments, but you never know. You really do need to organize that information. It's just this one is just a mess all over the place. Here's another one that makes my head hurt. Remember that conversation we had way back when talking about white space and being able to, and using bolded statements to show categories and such, because you don't know where one piece starts and another piece ends. So there's just so many things. And something else to look at is I see lots of what I call alphabet soup, all of these acronyms. You don't know that the person who's reading your resume is going to understand what those acronyms mean. Unless they are used in the job description, then I wouldn't include them. Because yes, they may be very well understood in the field that you're going into, but the person who first reads your resume may not be a person who actually works in the specific field you're looking at. Your HR managers are not going to understand all the terminology for accounting and for engineering and for production technicians. So you want to make sure that the person who reviews your resume understands what you're telling them. You guys want to add anything else to this one? All right. Alrighty. I can go ahead from here if you want. And when it is important, kind of as an addendum to your resume, I do not attach it, I do not include them on the resume. I do it as a separate sheet, a list of references. And when you're choosing references, you need to choose individuals who can talk about your skills and your qualities as it refers to work. And these can be former coworkers, former supervisors, former customers, former colleagues, people who knew your work because you worked alongside them, but they were at a different organization. Just people who know you and can talk as to your work skills and your qualities as an employee. Putting your best friend on there just so they can talk about how great a fisherman you are is probably not important for references. What's really important is companies do check references. They do call and talk to these folks. So you need to make sure that you check with them before you list them as a reference. That way they're not taken by surprise and they don't say, Joe who? And why are you calling me about Joe? And so just make sure you check with people and say, can I list you as a reference? And also, it's okay to ask them, will you give me a good reference? Because you do not want to list someone as a reference who's going to say unflattering things about you. Also, make sure that all your contact information you list for your references is correct and make it easy for the company to reach them. The easiest is email always, but you want to usually include an email and a phone number if possible. And I think it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway, do not list your family members as your references, because hopefully your mama will only say good things about you, so the company probably doesn't want to talk to her. And I'm going to just throw a little bit in here. You know, we talked about how important it is to have somebody else look at your resume to look for those mistakes or those typos. Well, if you would like someone else to look at your resume, we're happy to do it. We will, if you want to send a resume, you just send it to that email address, resume@vcwnrmr.com. Then one of our team members will review your resume and create a critique along with some suggestions for you to make it better, and we'll send it back to you. and it is at no cost for anybody. It usually takes us a couple of days to sit down and go through it and actually type it up, but anybody who has an interest, you feel free to do this, and then you can also send it more than once. So if you send it to us, then we give you some suggestions, and you kind of make some changes, and you want to see if we think that makes it better, you're welcome to send it back. Yeah, we're open if anybody has any questions. Or Beth, do you have anything else you want to add?
I think we covered everything pretty well. I would just say, you know, as you work on your individual resumes, if you have questions, definitely send them to that email address that was on the previous screen. And, you know, we are happy to review resumes if you already have one. So just utilize the resources that are available to you. And thank you all for participating today.
All right. And if nobody has any questions, we thank you all. I hope it was helpful for everyone.